Real English conversations improve fluency. And today I have a natural conversation for you with a special guest you might already know. If we haven't met before, my name is Tanya, and I am the creator of my free More English Club for students who want to get more from my videos here on YouTube. You can join the club for free by clicking on the link in the description below, and I'll send you the practice plan that goes with this video and the previous videos. There's going to be a lot of great vocabulary in this conversation, so let's do it. Hi, Shauna. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you here on the channel. And I'd like to just start with having you introduce yourself and your podcast for us.
Yeah. So my name is Shauna. I am an ESL teacher, just like Tanya, but and also from California. I'm currently living in North Carolina, and on a weekly basis, I'm on my podcast, the American English Podcast, where I teach intermediate to advanced learners American English and specifically the culture and history of the United States. So I talk about a lot of stories, try to make it fun, teach new vocabulary throughout the lessons. Yeah, because to me, culture and language, I mean, they go hand in hand. Yeah.
Absolutely. You really
Yeah.
can't separate them.
Yeah. So we were just talking about the LA fires. And, I moved from LA here. Well, it was the end of 2023. So I've been here for just over about a year. And so we didn't experience the fires, but yeah, we decided to move from LA because the cost of living was so high. Now, for
Mm-hmm.
anybody from outside of the country, I think that might come as a shocker moving to New York City or to San Francisco or LA. And even for me, I was not aware that, childcare costs could be up to 1,400 a month per kid, like if they're under
Mm-hmm.
5 or, just the cost of utilities. And so there was a realization at one point where we were like, we don't need to be spending that amount of money per month. The United States is huge. There's a bunch of interesting places. Where could we possibly live that's maybe not in LA or maybe not even in California? And I'm open-minded. I don't have any attachment to California. I think it's a fantastic state. I think if I had to say visit the United States, I'd probably say California because of all the national parks, and the beauty. But,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I wasn't attached to it. And so I said, "Okay, well, let's go check out Vermont." We went to Vermont first, and
Okay.
I talked to some locals there, and it's beautiful. I like the
Absolutely.
mountains. I was very drawn to the mountains and nature and hiking, and but they said there's not much to do in
Mm.
Vermont, in the different cities. It's very small. The towns are very petite. And so yeah, so the next place we went to, same season, the fall of 2023, we went down to Asheville because it had come up so many times in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my husband's friends who has traveled the world said Asheville is his absolute favorite place. And I thought that's
Wow.
really interesting. I mean, do you know Asheville? Have you heard of Asheville before?
Yes, I have. I've actually been there,
Okay.
but it's been a very long time ago.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay, so I find it funny because people from California don't know of Asheville. I mean, it's not a huge city. There's like
No.
90,000, 95,000 people.
Yeah, it's
But on the
almost a town.
it is. It's not big, but the thing is, on the East Coast, it is on the map. Like people know this place because of the nature, the waterfalls,
Mm,
the
mhm,
arts scene, the restaurant scene. I mean,
mhm.
there's the Vanderbilts. They have the Biltmore Estate, the largest house in the United States. There's the most
Wow.
visited winery in the United States at the Biltmore Estate. So for me, I was like, that's exciting. There's so much happening in this place, and yet it still feels manageable
Mm-hmm.
and it's close to an airport. So if I do want to travel the world, I have that access. I'm not like out in the boonies, which you said the other day, out in the
Yes.
boonies, like out in the middle of nowhere. We're like still very well connected, but part of nature and part of a community feeling. And
Yes.
so that's kind of the draw. And we just sort of went around, said, I'll take it. I want to move. I want to move here. And we did. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, it's been over a year now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And we were also just talking about in that year, even though you
Mhm.
missed the fires in LA, you ended up being in North Carolina when the hurricane came through. And so,
Yes.
what can you tell us about some of the changes, some of the differences in climate? I mean, that right there, that's huge difference. But what have you noticed with that and your experience?
Yes. Well, so I think, well, in California, you're so used to wildfires. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
probably in the mountains, I'm assuming that every year it's on your mind.
Yes,
You're,
yes. I have been evacuated more than
oh, you
once,
have?
yes. Mhm. Yes, it's constant here.
Yeah. So I grew up also being exposed to a lot of wildfires and watching hills burn in my city.
Mhm.
It's not nice. And so coming out here, I guess I was a little bit naive because inland in the United States, I'm like, I lived in New York when we got hit by Hurricane Sandy.
Mhm.
So I knew like, okay, it goes up the like hurricanes can go up the coast, but I wasn't really aware that hurricanes can go inland and
Mhm.
what horrible destruction they can cause. And
Mhm.
so this past year, September, I think it was September 27th of 2024, we
Mhm.
were hit by one of the biggest hurricanes ever. Uh,
Yes.
and if you look at the map of where the hurricane went, I guess, is it called the eye of a hurricane? The
Yes, I think so.
central part of it,
Mhm.
where it's like right around the center, I guess, is where it's the strongest.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it went right over Asheville. And so it hit my neighborhood. We lost 21 houses. 21 houses in my small neighborhood went floating down the river.
My gosh.
Um, Going around town still is, you know, it's alarming because I think stuff comes on the news and everyone's talking about it, like the wildfires in California. It was everywhere. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden, it's gone. It's just not in the spotlight anymore. And it's as if it didn't happen. And so, like,
Yes.
we are still very much going through the pain of this hurricane and then the damage it caused. And I think that's the difference of California. You get the wildfires, you get the earthquakes. In the
Mhm.
central US, I was actually meaning to ask you this the other day. You probably got tornadoes.
Tornadoes. Yes,
Tornadoes.
and huge amounts of snow. Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yes. But
Um,
tornadoes, I would say, is the most dangerous, like an earthquake or a fire, although the snow can be very dangerous like the heat. Mhm.
okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So the Great Plains in general get hit pretty hard,
Especially the
the
ones
United
that are a
States.
little further north. I think that Kansas doesn't get it as much.
Mm,
Oklahoma definitely doesn't get it as much. But yes, in Nebraska we got lots of snow. And but a lot of that is
mm,
the difference, I think, is you can be prepared and you can be educated and
mm,
you have a lot more control over taking care of yourself than you do with these other storms that are
right.
happening so fast and so destructive and boom, they're over.
So, and this might be a dumb question, but so for the tornado, you obviously want to have a place that's underground, right?
Right. We had a cellar,
A
like a
cellar.
basement, but
Okay.
when someone says a cellar, and it's usually not finished, and
Okay.
they're used both as shelter from a storm or safety from the storm and a place to store food. because they're much
Okay.
cooler. Hmm.
Okay.
And so even if you don't have, for example, a full cellar, you might have a vegetable cellar that's very small just to keep your vegetables from your garden. We were talking
Yeah.
over on your channel, not channel, pardon me, over
Yeah.
on your podcast about large gardens. And this is
Yes.
how we stored a lot of the,
And all your
yes,
pickled veggies. Yes.
yes, yes. And
Okay, so they would
even
also be in
just
there.
winter vegetables like pumpkins and squash and things, onions, things that can, potatoes that can
Yeah.
last a whole year in the
Yeah.
cellar.
Wow.
So,
So you had that space, that safety space, and you could be prepared. And then also
mhm.
I'm guessing for snowstorms, you probably would want to be inside, probably not in a cellar for that.
Correct,
Right.
correct. Yeah, and just
Yeah. So
prepared with plenty of food out of the
right.
cellar because the cellar would get covered in snow and,
Yeah.
make sure you have heat and everything you need. And
So
yeah.
we were not prepared at all. I think there was talks beforehand. I told my husband, people are really concerned about this because we've had multiple days of rain leading up to it. And
Mhm.
so they're talking about the roots of the trees becoming weak. They're just sort of floating in there and
Mhm.
trees can topple over. And
Yes.
that's my neighborhood now. I mean, there's holes still in the roofs of, I think, every single house on every side of me.
Oh
So,
my gosh. Tell
yes,
our listeners what you mean by topple over.
to fall, they fell down, and it's actually disturbing to think about the sound. There was a crack. I mean, I could hear the trees falling in the neighborhood. We have 4 big ones down in my backyard, big oak trees, and you could hear the crack, and you could hear this sort of silence for a second, and then bam,
Yes,
bam,
I've
and
heard trees fall here.
oh, and then
Yes.
the yeah, and then not knowing when it was dark out and you're like, "Is that gonna hit my house?" It's a
Yes.
very disturbing feeling. So, um, I think going into this hurricane and talking about this, there were a lot of people that I spoke to from the East Coast, and they said, "Ugh, hurricanes happen all the time." And it's true. They happen
Mhm.
all the time. Every year they go through the list, like, and we had
Mhm.
specific names for them every
Mhm.
year.
Mhm.
Um, Hurricane Hugo, you were talking about. This was Hurricane Helene. So we work through the alphabet, and that's how you
Mhm.
know which hurricane it is. And so people were saying it's not a big deal. So I think what I took away from this is it is not a big deal a lot of the times. A lot of times it's rain and that's
Mhm.
it. And a lot
Yes.
of time and sometimes usually I don't know how often it can
Mhm.
be very destructive and you'll have flooding and what else comes from it? Yeah, the trees toppling over and the phone
Electric
poles,
lines.
and
Yeah, the
you'll
phone
lose
poles.
you'll have a blackout, right?
Yeah,
So you won't
yeah.
have electricity, and that was our big issue. All our food went bad. We had no water because the
Yeah.
reservoir was, like, full of gunk, and yeah, so
Uh,
it was bad.
yeah. I want to ask you a little more about that, but first, it never occurred to me, but listening to you, it sounds a lot like someone who moves to California and has never been in California and is scared of earthquakes. And
Mm,
the vast majority of people in California have never been hurt by an earthquake, but have been in an earthquake. And so
yes.
I know that people say, oh, earthquakes happen all the time. It's really no big deal. Yes, you heard of this
Mhm.
one or, that one. And it sounds very similar. You
Right, you
experience
get
them a lot and it's only a few times that they're extremely destructive, but when they are,
exactly, like 1906 San Francisco, knocked out all of San Francisco, or like
yes.
1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, that
Yes.
was also extremely destructive, and the people that lived through it, they have a different perception of that
Totally.
natural disaster type
Yeah, they would never say,
stuff.
"Oh, it's no big deal, la la la."
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly, like, now I will never say a hurricane is no big deal, so, yeah,
Yes.
I guess you gotta live through it to
Yes.
gain that
So,
perception.
how long was it that you had no electricity and until you started to get back to a relatively normal life again?
1 month.
Oh, wow.
1 month, yeah. No internet. The water was the worst though, because that was almost 3 months with no fresh water.
Mm,
Um, so we had to buy water, and they had stations around the city where you could go to fill up your water containers. There was a point in the beginning where my neighbor came out thirsty, and he's an old man, and I felt so bad for him that I had to get water from my realtor. I went out
mm,
searching for water for him, and I got water from my realtor's bathtub that she had like stored up. And I went over, and he's like, I will never forget that. And it was like this very emotional moment of like
mm-hmm.
providing water for someone who was thirsty. So that was really bizarre. Like, you think this is not going to happen in the United States, and it can happen in the United States, which I'm sure, like with the fires now, like a lot of people had those moments too where they go, this doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
Mother Nature is stronger than
Yes.
anybody. So,
Yes. Yes. That's amazing. And
mm,
did you get to experience or witness? That was one story of
mm,
it, but the community coming together stronger than you might expect in other times.
that's a great question. And absolutely. I think that's one of the things that was so uplifting in hard times, where
Mm-hmm.
we had potlucks, weekly meetings on Wednesdays. We had a few potlucks where people would bring food. Like if you didn't have food because maybe you ran out of, power, your refrigerator had rotten food inside. Like everybody was contributing at one location every week. And World Central Kitchen too came to my neighborhood on a regular basis. I love that organization now that I see
Mm.
how active they are. Um, but yeah, they had designated tasks. There was the person who had all the chainsaws because we needed to cut down trees.
Mm.
We knew that house was there. We had the person that was going down to the river to gather water to flush toilets. So if you needed to have
Yes.
like Mark, I think Matt, no, Matt was the guy to do that. Contact Matt if you need flushing water. We had one person that said, I have the biggest truck in the neighborhood. We're going to go to the gas station and we're going to fill up the gas tank because the lines were too long. Um, because a lot of times they weren't taking card. They didn't, their systems were not up. So the lines were just extremely long. And so they said, well, let's send one person and we'll siphon the gas out of the gas tank and give it to the people that need it for their generators and things like that. And then the
Wow.
generators were connected with extension cords. It was the most insane thing. But the organization I saw, I was like, these are the types of people I want to be around. You know, Asheville is a community of people. I mean, the city is the way it is because of the people here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is very open minded. It's like if you said, what is a proactive person like? It's someone from here. Like they're going to go out, they're going to figure out how to help. They're going to come together, and I think that was like a big sign like I'm in the right place because I want to be around this type of person. Um
Wow.
yeah,
That's so
very
amazing. And
crazy.
so, do you think it is that way in general in the whole state that people are more prepared and that kind of thing?
More prepared.
Mo
I
Ready to help, more
Oh,
open-minded, more whatever.
so so I think in natural disasters, people really step up to the plate.
Yeah, I think so too.
They say they really see somebody in need and they're willing to help. I know that one of my listeners is from Valencia, and during the flooding, she was saying that was the one thing she mentioned that was bringing her spirits up was the fact that people were truly willing to help other people.
Yes.
I don't know. What do you think about that? Have you seen that sort of?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. In the little town that I live in here, I think partly because it's a small town, it's almost always like that. If
Yeah.
anyone has a loss, even if it's an individual loss. Like we've had small
Mm,
concerts for someone who got cancer. It
mm,
doesn't have to be happening to everyone.
right.
Um, I think that in times of crisis, there are different
Mhm,
types of crisis.
mhm.
I think it brings out the best in us. And I know this isn't the direction we thought our conversation would
Yeah,
go, but
that's
I
okay.
love it. I always brainstorm this with people.
Mm,
How do we bring that out of the crisis more into our everyday life? How do we, I don't know. I
I
see
don't
you.
know.
Yeah.
You know, like, I have to say that I do feel more connected to my neighbors. I know everybody that lives around
Hmm.
me. And I kind of knew the people around me beforehand because I do feel like people from here are very openly friendly. Like you go around the neighborhood and everybody's waving hi to the point your
Yes.
hands like I can't say hi anymore. Like
Yeah.
my hand hurts. My arm
Yes.
hurts. Um, so yeah, I get that from the people, but I do feel more connected after the crisis because of that. So I don't think it should be you need a crisis in order to feel more connected and know the people around you. I don't know. I think everyone can get out of their comfort zone. Maybe bring cookies to your neighbor. Like Americans are
Yes.
so receptive to receiving stuff. I know that sounds really stupid, but like they people love cookies, people love brownies, make something and say, "Hey, this is who I am, like, who are you?" And I've just found that's, a really nice way to get good vibes going from one house to the
Yes.
other because it doesn't need to be distant, like, you should be, amicable with the people in your immediate
Absolutely.
community.
So it's very interesting and curious, but as a person who started my career in architecture, I've said this before that
Mhm.
a lot of what changes neighborhoods is architecture. Whoever invented the garage door opener changed American neighborhoods forever because now you can drive into your garage without getting
That's
out of
true.
the car, close the garage, go into your house, and you don't even wave at your neighbor unless you happen to catch each other's eyes
Yeah,
through the windshield of your car. So it,
that's a really interesting point.
yeah,
It's crazy how those small little inventions can have such a drastic impact on, yeah, the
yeah,
average person. Yeah, for
yeah. And
sure.
if you think of not just when North Carolina and California became states, but the housing booms, when the housing booms were,
Mhm.
the way houses were built is different in each of the states
Yes.
have a lot of character based on, we talked a little bit about this over on your
Yeah,
podcast too. So
it's true. Well, I you know, and I probably should look this up, but I vaguely remember so Ike Eisenhower, when he was
yes.
president, he wanted to help make houses affordable for the common person. And so and you guys can check in on this. I might be saying the wrong president, but I do know the history is correct. So and he decided to create, these communities and LA is an effect of hey, let's make these single family homes. Everyone's going to be able to build them. And so it's kind of like one is like a cookie cutter version of the next one, all right next to each other, right?
Yes.
Lots of
Yeah.
houses, and then you get this sprawl where they're
Yes.
just like all right next to each other, and it's just yeah, houses. And then you were mentioning the other day that in Nebraska, like it's typical to have these larger yards where there's not a fence between the
Mm-hmm.
properties and kids could run back and forth, like, casually going on their neighbor's yard and coming back and it was just a bigger space.
Yeah.
And I have to say that is true from what I've
Yes.
seen here for sure.
Y-
Like
yes.
we have we're on an acre of land,
Uh-huh.
and that's not abnormal. In California, it'd be like, "What? You're on an
That's what I
acre
was
of
just gonna
land?"
say.
Oh my
Wow.
god. But here that's just normal.
Yes. And
Yeah.
same in Nebraska. And I
Yeah.
mean, obviously there's all kinds of normal, but
Yeah.
the Yes, when you were saying maybe I wasn't paying attention as a child, I was thinking you probably would have remembered experiences though, because for me, as a child growing up in Nebraska, Kansas, that area, you not only could run across the yards, all the kids in the neighborhood are out. We're all running across the different yards. And if you happen to be closer to the Joneses when you need to go to the bathroom, you might run in and say hi to their mom who you knew and your mom knew. And I was at Mrs. Jones today and she said to tell you that the ladies PTO is changing next week or whatever. So it would have been
Yes.
experiential knowledge of not talking about it as adults do necessarily.
Yeah, totally. And I have to say that's exactly the same on my street. And it's something that feels like
Really?
my mom saw it and she goes, "This feels like something from my childhood where the kids are running
Wow.
outside, no shoes, like
Yes.
just running up and down the streets. They throw out their hula hoops and their soccer balls and they just go to town. It's
Yes.
just so much fun. And there's no like time other than like dinner time when my girls need to come in. They're just sort of out there and there's no parents. Like they're just
Yes.
like the 4-year-old across the street. Her parent, I'm like, where are her parents? I'm like out the window going, what are my daughters doing now? What are they doing? But
Yes.
but no, it's like running free. So I don't know
Yes.
if that's also, something on this side of the country that's more like that. I don't know. But it definitely is something that I've also seen.
It is related to time period. It's related to uh,
Mm,
community planning, all
mm.
of civil planning, all
Yes.
of that kind of
Yeah.
thing, architecture.
All goes
And of
back.
course, now it's really related to the internet, television.
And I know you told me you were the farm girl. You were out
Yes.
there with the boys running around getting dirty. And I think that's a really special type of childhood. You got to get your hands
Yes.
dirty. You got to, jump into the pit full of frogs popping all
Yes.
over the place. Like that's what where memories come from. Like, do you remember the day you sat and like watched a movie as a kid or like, were on the internet scrolling? Not so much, but you will remember being out there in nature doing stuff that kids should be doing. So,
Yes. Well, and what's funny, it's not in nature, but one of my younger daughters' really strong memories from childhood, she was she had a friend who was one of my best friend's daughters. There were about 3 years between them, but they used to play dolls on the phone.
oh, wow. That's
Yes.
really good for speaking practice. Get your
Right? It's
language
such
students to
yes.
yeah.
And I remember they had called each other. There were no, well, there were probably cell phones, but we didn't have them. Um, she had the wireless telephone, the house phone,
Mhm.
and I walked into the room to put some clothes away or something, and I was talking to her, and her little friend said, "Hi, Tanya," and I was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "I'm playing with Zoe on the phone." I'm like, "You're playing on the phone," and she had
That's
all her
amazing.
dolls out, and she and Zoe were talking to each other like they were in the same room.
That's awesome though. Like, I mean, for a kid, if they don't have like a brother or sister that's the appropriate age to play with them, I mean, power to them to be it's great for creativity.
I love the idea of not having any idea how this could be fabulous, but the children finding a way, and
Yep.
and then the parenting idea of, okay, what could I embrace in this? That's,
Yeah.
never happened in my childhood. Now, are
Yeah,
you
like the
kidding? We
playing
had a
on the phone.
party line. You couldn't
Yeah.
even talk for more than a minute.
Oh, yeah, that's so funny. I know.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had a call with my parent or a talk with my parents about technology. And so I'm hearing the terms come up party line. And then you
Yes.
mentioned the other day waiting for the TV shows to come on and I was like
Yes.
that reminds me of that call too. Like I didn't know you had to wait for TV shows or that party lines exist. That was
Yes, you had to have a
interesting.
television guide, a TV guide, and look
Oh my
when does your
gosh.
show come on and
TV
plan for a week
guides.
and yes,
Oh, that's funny. I never
all kinds of
thought
history
about
here.
that. Yeah, I wonder if other countries had that.
I'm
Love
sure
it.
they did. Maybe not the
Yeah.
same publisher, but yeah, I'm sure they did in some
That's
way.
funny. I think the talks about technology are too good. Like I actually would really enjoy in a foreign language, if there's any foreign language teacher listening to this, to hear how these things were in other countries. Like, did you guys have pagers? Did you skip that and go straight to, you know, like
Y-
cordless cell phones and things, or you know what I mean? I do find it
Totally.
interesting.
Totally.
Funny.
Yes, I'd love to hear from anyone listening any of
Yeah.
your memories of these different things through history. And, you know, different things hit different countries at different times, or we
Yes.
have them at different times. And so, all right, this
Yeah.
was fabulous. We really went off on a tangent. In other words,
Yes.
our conversation very naturally went in another direction. But
Sometimes it's got to
to,
be that way.
yes, bring it back. And you mentioned to me earlier that even in North Carolina, you're feeling the effects of the fire in LA.
Mhm.
Would you tell just a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up
Yeah.
the
So, yeah, just at the beginning of January, there was the Palisades fire. There was the Altadena fire, Eaton fire, I think the name was it,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Eaton,
mm-hmm,
and it burned a massive amount of acreage in
mm-hmm,
California in the south, in LA. And so
mm-hmm,
Palisades is one of the, I would say, wealthiest neighborhoods of Los
mm-hmm,
Angeles. It's right on the coast, right next to Malibu. And uh, we lived in the valley. And so, like Woodland Hills, it's right on the other side of Palisades. So, like, we would drive over to the Palisades, often have
mm,
lunch there. And it's really bizarre knowing that that's no longer there.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, we had 5 friends who lost their homes. And so, uh, a mom with 2 little kids, 3 and a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, friend from childhood, they lost everything. Um, and then some friends in the Palisades that my husband worked with because he's a musician, but they fortunately had other properties that they could go to. So they're a little bit more financially stable than the Eaton fire area, which, you know, lots of
Right.
people's homes were burned and then they have nothing. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, that's another natural disaster possibility. I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully in upcoming years, I keep saying, why not figure out how to? I mean, there's a lot of smart people out there. Figure out how to take the flood waters from the East Coast and get a pipe and put it over into California.
Onto
Like,
the
we
fire
have too
areas.
much
Yes.
water. You guys have too much fire. Like, let's figure this out. Collaborate.
Yes.
Well,
So
yeah.
outside of these natural disasters, what kind of weather difference do you notice, and like difference between the Atlantic and the Pacific and those coastal, not not just the coast, but the coastal states?
Mm, well, I have heard, and I mean, you probably could have an opinion about this because you said you spent time in South Carolina. They're known for being quite humid.
Yeah.
Florida, actually, all the way up into New York, because New York was very humid in summertime when I lived there. And we have dry heat in California. You go
Hmm.
outside when it's 100 degrees and your skin just feels like you're frying like an egg.
Yeah,
So that I think is one of the big differences. So your hair will look different, your skin will look
totally.
different.
But with a country this big, oh my goodness, we have so many different types of
Yeah.
weather and um,
Natural disasters and different types of people, different types of food, which we didn't talk about. But yeah, I think that's what makes it fun, is that even as a native to the United States to travel here, because I've had culture shock. I know you
hmm.
probably had culture shock
Yes,
where you go, "Oh, people are this nice," or like, "Oh,
yes,
they eat this at school lunch, like chicken and waffles, really? Like,
yes,
is that
yes,
is that healthy?" You know,
yes,
like,
yes,
um, yeah, there's these moments where you just go, "Oh, that's different."
yes,
But that's kind of the joy of, I think, living in such a diverse country. So you get to explore
yes,
and feel like you're traveling far.
right.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up completely,
Mhm.
tell the listeners where they can find you, a
Mhm.
little bit about your program, and I will also put in these links in the description below.
Yes. So AmericanEnglishPodcast.com is my website. It's kind of explanatory. American English Podcast. It is what it says. That's all I do, American English. And you can listen on any podcast platform,
Mhm.
Spotify, Apple, Castbox, any of them.
Mhm.
And I post weekly. Yeah, different topics, different guests. I just had Tanya on an episode to talk about Nebraska and her experience growing up there. So if you listen to that one first. And yeah, you'll get a whole new perspective of an area of the United States that personally I've never been to, but it was really such a joy to hear about how people live there, the farming, growing up in that region. So check it out. Yeah.
Yes, fabulous. And I know your website has the same name and
Yep.
you're on Instagram. And I was over on your website. So if anyone's interested, you can go over there and
Mhm.
find how do they get to where the states are? I know I went there, but I
Oh, it's on the
forgot.
homepage. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so for example, if you're traveling to Florida and you want to learn about culture in Florida, you would just go to the homepage, scroll down, and you'll see a little section where there's all of the state names, and you just click on the state name and it'll populate with all of the episodes about that state. So,
Which is so cool.
thank you.
And soon I'm thinking you, or maybe by the time this posts, it will already be there. You can go to Nebraska
And
and
you'll be the
hear,
only one there.
which is not uncommon. It's less population in Nebraska, well,
I
depending on
love
the size
that.
of states, of course. So
Yeah, love
thank
that.
you so
Thanks.
much, Shauna. We're definitely going to have to do this again. It's been
Sounds
great to
great.
get to know you a little bit
You
more.
too. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Bye bye.
Bye.
I had so much fun getting to know Shauna in this conversation. And don't forget, you can get all of the vocabulary and the free practice plan for this video by joining my free More English Club. The link is in the description below. And if you enjoy learning English in this fun and relaxed way, I suggest you try this video next for another real conversation. I'll see you there.